Hello, everyone, and welcome into today's edition of To The Point Podcast. Everybody's doing well on this Thursday. Here a little earlier today. Joining an hour early, just got a few things in the works. No show tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to get another. Everybody's got their addictions. Maybe it's chips, maybe it's pop, liquor. Some of them can be worse. Occasionally drugs. For the people out there, I've got a number of tattoos. I'm getting another one tomorrow. So no show tomorrow. So I'll be getting that done, but I'll be back Monday. And next week should be a big week here in the podcast. The NFL draft is quickly coming upon us. Matthew Wright's going to join next Thursday. We'll preview the draft, go through some big players. So we're going to do that. But a lot of interesting things to talk about today. A lot of things in the NHL, NBA world. Some baseball, a series that I really have my eyes on going into this weekend, a big matchup that I think is interesting. But I want to start today with the NFL. And the news, it never stops in the NFL. And this one starts from San Francisco, where star wide receiver, dual threat, jack of all trades player, Deebo Samuel has requested a trade out of the Bay Area. It's reportedly not about money. Jeff Darlington said it's just Deebo wants out of San Francisco. Apparently, it might have something to do with the tax situation with California. He wants a new location. And also in the report, it was saying he doesn't want to be a running back wide receiver combo anymore. He just wants to be regarded as a true wide receiver. Now, there's a lot to this story. And the reason there's a lot to it is because Deebo, I see him as being right and wrong in this situation for vastly different reasons. Deebo is right to, and this is not about the trade. I don't really have an opinion about him wanting out of San Francisco. If you don't have an opinion on something, you don't have to give one. I think there's people on TV that do that enough. I'm not doing that. If he wants to leave, leave. I wouldn't trade him. There's my opinion. When it comes to the label, that's the more interesting topic here. It's the label of what running back wide receiver. That's the more interesting tale here. So he wants that removed. I get it. I think he's right to want that, and here's why. Running backs are not getting paid anymore, or they're not going to. You're going to see that running backs, after their first contract, are not going to be given big money. Why? Well, if we look at the running backs, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry to an extent, these guys who played through the rookie contract gave you great production, great, injury-free seasons, all-pro type talent. They're great. But eventually, when they played 3 to 4 seasons in the NFL, and you're playing a running back position where you're getting the ball, you're getting hit on every play. Even if you're in the backfield, you're taking a hit. It wears on you. And eventually your body can't take it anymore. So you're bound to get injury. Case in point, Christian McCaffrey is one of the most talented players in the whole National Football League. He's the most important player to the Carolina Panthers offense. However, he has played 10 games in the last 3 seasons. He is due $20 million each year over the next 4. Carolina has that in the books. They're trying to trade him prior to the draft. Good luck with that. But with McCaffrey, with Ezekiel Elliott, who the Cowboys would cut today if they could, they would have done it already prior to free agency. But it's such a cap charge, it's not even worth it. It hurts them more to cut Zeke. Great running back out of Ohio State. Was the MVP of the national championship game, the driving force behind Ohio State winning a national title with Urban Meyer. And he goes through the NFL, where his first year he runs for nearly 2,000 yards. The next year he's suspended for 4 games, still finishes 3rd in rushing. First the next year, following year 3rd. The past 2 have been a disaster for him. He's not the same guy. He doesn't have the burst. He asks out of games, and they've had to draft Tony Pollard and start to split carries. So what the NFL has realized is holy crap, there's a lot of good running backs in college. And because we just had Ezekiel Elliott, we saw him in college. He was pretty good. But also running backs are the easiest position to transition to the National Football League. Quarterbacks need time. Sometimes wide receivers don't connect. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase play with each other in college. It's rare that you see that type of production. Justin Jefferson, those guys are outliers. Keyshawn Johnson, who went first overall, didn't have immediate chemistry when he was with the New York Jets. He took some time. Great player, Super Bowl champion, but it took time for him. Where at running back, it's more complicated than this, but it's also pretty simplistic. You have an offensive line that can block for you, or they can't, and that can ruin your career. Case in point, Saquon Barkley. But you have a great offensive line. You have speed. You're young. You got spunk. And you can have really good production. Joe Mixon, the running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm sure he's going to want a contract. He's had a couple really good seasons, had a tough go into the NFL, had a domestic violence charge. I won't go through that. He dropped in the draft, was taken later. He would have been a first-round pick. But you looked, McCaffrey, Mixon, Henry, all these guys were going in the first round. They're all high draft picks. Elliott went fourth at running back. Leonard Fournette went fourth. I looked at a lot of big boards today. Daniel Jeremiah works for the NFL Network. Mel Kiper works for the Mothership. Matt Miller, who's a guy I follow, NFL Draft Scout on Twitter. Good follow. Nobody has a running back going in the first round. Breece Hall out of Iowa State is a good tailback, but they're not going to take him in the first round because it's a tough pick. You got to pay them more money up front, and then it's quicker to get to their next contract. The next wave is going to be running backs taken second, third, fourth round. It's not first. It's not going to be, okay, let's pay this guy a bunch of money. And the reason I talk about all these running backs when it comes to Deebo Samuel is Deebo Samuel is right to feel this way because he might be labeled a running back. Yes, he's a jack of all trades, but he led the San Francisco 49ers in rushing last year in the postseason. He almost single-handedly got them to the Super Bowl with porn star Jimmy at quarterback. But if the thought is, well, Deebo Samuel, who wants to be paid the most money outside of a quarterback, Jeff Darlington reports, which good for him. I wouldn't give it to him, but that's a whole other discussion. But he knows, he's a smart cat. He knows he's never going to get that money if his label is more running back than wide receiver. But these agents, these executives in sports will do whatever it takes to get a discount. If you meet a business person, they're looking for the best. They're looking for anything they can get. If you ever met really rich people, they love free stuff more than anyone. Homeless people don't like free stuff as much as rich people do. But if they see Deebo and they say, well, the running back market's going down. Maybe this is what John Lynch is thinking in San Francisco. Deebo's coming up. 1 year left this coming season on his rookie deal, then he's free. Well, we could franchise tag him. That's a lot of money. But if his market value is more to that of a running back, which is the value is going down, than a wide receiver, which continues to grow. And yes, there's bad wide receiver contracts. Julio Jones comes to mind, even though he gave you 12 years of great production. Now he's broken down. But you see the guys getting big money. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill this offseason has been wide receiver rich, literally and figuratively, in trades and in monetary value. So if you can look at a scenario and say, I can pay a guy on this scale with the running backs where their value is deteriorating, or I could pay him on this side of the coin where wide receivers are getting paid more now than they ever have. Which are you going to pick? It's not that hard. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to say, you know what? I'm going to go with the cheaper option because I think that benefits us in the long run. Which it does. It's smart. But for Deebo Samuel, it doesn't help him. He wants to make as much money as he possibly can. It's going to be very hard for him to do that if he has the label of being a dual threat. So I understand why he doesn't want this label. But, and this is the but. This is where there's always a but. And this is where I don't agree with him. I would take Deebo Samuel over any wide receiver in football. Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill. Davante Adams is a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel. Just pure route running, he's better. What makes Deebo so unique and more valuable to me, maybe not in the long run, but this coming season, is his dual threat. Is the fact that he will go in the backfield and line up. The fact that he's a yards after the catch receiver, better than Deebo is. The fact that he's so versatile, he'll do whatever it possibly takes for the team to win, is what makes him extremely valuable. Because prior to this offseason, it was as if he didn't have a big ego. It was just as if he's a great guy. You know, a really good wide receiver / running back who, yes, he's a wide receiver, but he'd line up at running back if we have injuries, if we have deficiencies. He'll line up back there and help us win football games. That was the perception. But now you hear, well, he's not willing, doesn't want to do that anymore. I think it hurts his value tenfold because it tells you, is he really a team player? Is he really that selfless? Because if he's not willing to do it all, if he's not going to be the jack of all trades, to me, his value, his significance decreases significantly. He's no longer the guy I would rank one ahead of guys like Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, you name it. It goes down because he's not a better wide receiver, just pure wide receiver, route running, make a big catch than Davante Adams. I don't think he's more valuable than Tyreek Hill. I could go through the list. Is he more valuable than Justin Jefferson in Minnesota? He's really, really good. Is he more valuable than Jamar Chase? Probably not. So it might not be fair for Davante Adams because for Deebo Samuel, because he's in a no-win situation. Because if he keeps running the football at the rate that he's doing it, he's not going to have a long career. He's not going to make the money that he wants to make. But if he keeps doing it, but if he doesn't keep doing it, I don't know how much money I don't think he'll make as much money as he thinks he will. I think he looks at Tyreek Hill, he looks at Davante Adams, these type contracts that are being handed out, and I think automatically he just thinks, well, I'm next man up, I'm going to get it. And I hope he does, because I really like him. Great player, great personality, but wide receivers aren't quarterbacks. Dak Prescott and Kirk D. Cousins are two guys that got huge money, huge contracts because they were next man up and because they were quarterbacks. Plain and simple. Were they better than Josh Allen? Were they better than Mahomes, Tom Brady, whoever was before them? No. But they were next ones on the block. They saw the salary cap was going up and they said, okay, I'm making this. And in Kirk D. Cousins' case, it was easy. Minnesota just does whatever he says. Great career, guaranteed money, has won nothing. Dak Prescott went through a long negotiation, had a tough injury, but at the end of it, he made $75 million last year. So it was worth it for him. Is Dak Prescott better than a lot of these quarterbacks at the top? No. But you're playing a dependent position. You cannot win without a quarterback. You can win without an elite wide receiver. Well, Cooper Kupp might have been elite, but the Rams had OBJ for a quarter, in the Super Bowl. They didn't have Robert Woods for the entire Super Bowl, but they had Matthew Stafford. You need that element. You can't win without it. So, unfortunately, wide receivers will never be as valuable as quarterbacks. And I think, unfortunately for Deebo Samuel, he's never going to get what he ultimately wants. He wants the respect of a quarterback when it comes to money. He wants the respect of being the top wide receiver in football. I think Deebo Samuel is the top dual threat wide receiver, dual threat player in the entire league. I take him over anybody. But would I take him number one overall, number two, if it was just based on route running and receiving the football? I wouldn't. And I'm not so sure I'd be just clamoring to pay him either. So I think he's at a crossroads here where if he can use some leverage, if he truly wants out of San Francisco, maybe wherever he's traded, he gets the money. I doubt it. Maybe he will. Miami did it. Vegas did it. But I think those are different situations. A.J. Brown also wants out of Tennessee. He's really good. Very different from Deebo. But again, if Deebo's not doing the other things, who's better? A.J. Brown's pretty good. DK Metcalf's on the board. Are all these wide receivers going to keep leaping one another? I think there's going to be GMs that just say enough. Because Tyreek Hill got paid slightly more than Devontae Adams. You can sell that because Tyreek Hill is the fastest player in the NFL. And he's also a Super Bowl champion. He's cheetah. He's a difference maker. And you can say, okay, he makes more than Devontae. I can live with that. But if you go and say, okay, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel are making more, I just think GMs are going to say, no. You're not making his type money because you're not better than him. And that takes a lot of stones. But there's a lot of good receivers in this draft. And again, they're rookies. You got to nurture them. I'd take the veteran. Don't get me wrong. But I'd also like to pay the rookie contract. Deebo's on a rookie contract this year. That would excite me a lot. Because he's great right now, but then you have to start paying him. And if those injuries linger and he's only willing to be a receiver, how valuable is he? The NFL draft is a week from tonight. By most indications, by most people that you listen to, this is not going to be that exciting of a draft. The quarterback class is lackluster. You got Kenny Pickett, you got Malik Willis, you got Sam Howell Jr. III out of North Carolina. These guys are going to go. There's going to be other quarterbacks, but it's not. This could be a draft where the quarterbacks all miss. I heard Daniel Jeremiah say today on yesterday, so we're at NFL Live, that he would take Davis Mills, who went in the 4th round last year in the draft, would be the first quarterback taken in this year's draft. So that tells you where this class is and what they think of them. That doesn't mean they're all going to be busts. That's just how they're perceived right now. The first pick is likely going to be Aiden Hutchinson, the pass rusher out of Michigan. So there's a lot of tackles. There's a lot of pass rushers. There's a whole lot of sex appeal. But these receivers wanting money, not showing up for minicamp, things of that nature, Deebo, A.J. Brown, I think it can make for interesting television, some interesting storylines as we move forward, because you still have the Kyler Murray story where if you're not following this, Kyler Murray did not report to voluntary minicamp. It's being Larry Fitzgerald, who doesn't say anything bad, might be the most respected person in pro sports, said this week on an interview that Kyler can be very selfish. He's self-centered. He's an egomaniac, and basically called him out when it comes to how Kyler's been handling this situation with the Cardinals. And although the Cardinals say they're not trading Kyler, they have no interest in doing it, Kyler has said he's not going to play until he gets a new contract. So they're in a standstill. I wouldn't want to pay him big money yet. Hasn't won a playoff game. Is hurt every season. He's the smallest quarterback in the NFL. Last year, he missed 5 games. He's missed at least 3 games in every season he's played in. I love his spunk. He's incredibly fun to watch. But at his size, he's not going to be a guy that plays for 10 to 15 years, if I had to guess. Incredibly talented, but he seems to fade down the stretch. He's injury prone. And if it's true, because AJ Green even came out and said he would re-sign with the Cardinals, oddly enough, and said he's had problems with Kyler when it comes to his ego and getting past it. So is there Kyler Murray rumors? Is he the Aaron Rodgers of this year's draft? There's the interest with Carolina, who have the 6th pick. Their new offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo, if you remember, he was the head coach of the New York Football Giants. He had such success there after the Tom Coughlin era. But he got asked this week about Sam Darnold, who is a former Jets quarterback who they signed last season. He's guaranteed $20 million this year, guaranteed to making that. So that's a good. And they asked him, is Sam Darnold your starting quarterback? Unequivocally, yes. Yes, he is. But then about 30 seconds later into the interview, he says, well, I don't know, the draft and everything. We got to look, see what options we have. We want a quarterback for the next 10 years. That's our focus. So is he your starting quarterback or not? That answer says he's probably not our long-term answer. So does Carolina do they reach and select a quarterback at 6? Do they trade out of it? There's interest there. And then there's the Baker Mayfield of it all. Baker Mayfield, who did not report to Cleveland Browns camp. Deshaun Watson is there, but Baker's not. He's waiting to either be traded or potentially be cut because teams, I don't think, want to give up the draft capital in order to get Baker Mayfield. Robbie Anderson of the Carolina Panthers says he has no interest in getting Baker Mayfield, so that was a shot across the bow. But Jeff Darlington, just to keep you guys up to date on news, said this week on Twitter that the second Baker Mayfield is cut, the Steelers would sign him the very next day. Meaning that there's the possibility that Baker Mayfield could remain in the AFC North, potentially play Cleveland twice this upcoming season. That would make for an interesting development because they signed Mitch Trubisky. They have Mason Rudolph under contract. Tragically, Dwayne Haskins passed away a few weeks ago. But Baker Mayfield, to me, would step in and be the new starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that would make for some interesting theater this year. But do they make a move on like the second day of the draft where Cleveland can get some capital? Do teams just say, you know what, Cleveland, we know you're not keeping him because you can't do it salary cap wise. So just cut him and we'll pay him. You can pay his salary. We'll pay him minimum this season to come play for us. And he can prove that he's worth a long-term extension. So, is he moved prior to the draft? These are interesting storylines to follow for me. But Baker's a good quarterback. I don't think he's a great quarterback, but he's definitely being humble. I think he should take this as a humbling thing, not as people are just putting me down and cry me a river. He should use this as fuel. I think that's when he plays his best football. We'll see if he does that, but I think Carolina, Seattle, and Pittsburgh are the likely destinations. And for him personally, I think Pittsburgh's the best situation. Seattle is going through a rebuild. Again, they might still have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but their offensive line sucks. And I just don't see Seattle being a winning team, and I don't see Baker having a whole lot of success in the NFC West, quite frankly. Carolina, that division is weak. I mean, you got Atlanta, they got Mariota at quarterback now. They're going to be terrible. The Saints have Winston. They're still trying to compete. They're in an interesting situation. And obviously you have the Bucs with Tom Brady. But I don't think that would be the worst situation for him. It's a small town. It wouldn't be all about Baker. Hopefully he could shut up, not do as many progressive commercials. But Robbie Anderson, although he said the other day he didn't want him, is a good wide receiver. McCaffrey, when healthy, could really help him out when the running game and passing out of the backfield. But like I said, Pittsburgh would be the best, and I think it's because he would have a chip on his shoulder. He gets to play against Cleveland. I think that would motivate him. They get to see him all the time, be in that division. And they got Claypool. They got Deontay Johnson. They got Eric Ebron. They got Pat Freiermuth, who's a great tight end. So they have the weapons. They still have a good offensive line. They still have Cam Hayward on the back end and Devin Bush and Joe Hayden and Minka Fitzpatrick. Their defense is still very good. And I think with Baker Mayfield, Pittsburgh would be able to compete at least for a playoff position, if not for the division. Because yes, Cleveland is likely going to be better, but is Deshaun Watson going to be suspended, and for how long? Because that can make a huge difference if Jacoby Brissett is starting 6 of the 17 games this season for the Cleveland Browns. Also, where does Baltimore go? Obviously, Lamar is going to be back, but his health, the health of the team, the wide receiver position, do they look to upgrade that spot? So that is still very much up in the air in Baltimore. And then obviously you keep going through it. You'll find problems everywhere, but you have Cincinnati, who just come off getting to the Super Bowl. I've been on the record since the Super Bowl. I think they'll have a down season. I wouldn't be shocked if they don't make the playoffs whatsoever. We'll wait and see on that one. But that's kind of where we are right now. Waiting to see what comes of these guys, of guys like Baker Mayfield, of Kyler Murray, of Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. Does anything happen prior to the draft, after the draft? That's where the interest is. We'll talk about the players next week, where we think they're going to go. We'll kind of do our mock draft, me and Ryder, next Thursday, and he'll tell us where he wants the Patriots to go. I think I know where he wants them to go, receiver. But we'll talk about that next week. But again, lots happening coming in. And also reveal my 3 players that I really like going into this draft. And none of them are quarterbacks. I was going to go NBA. Let's go hockey for a minute, because a couple interesting developments in the NHL world. I'm going to start with Alex Ovechkin. Last night, scores goals 49 and 50. And, I think we just take for granted what Alex Ovechkin does. I think we just think, well, it's Ovechkin and Crosby. We really expect this duo just to be fantastic every year. And that thought process just tells us what they've done over their careers and how dominant they've been. But Alex Ovechkin last night gets to 50 goals on the season. And he's 36 years old, which he's the oldest player to score 50 in the modern era. And it's just incredible what he continues to do. Yes, Austin Matthews has 58. Yes, Leon Draisaitl has more. But the fact that he stays competitive, that he's had a great season, over 80 points, this team is going to make the playoffs, I think just tells you everything you need to know about Alex Ovechkin. This guy has been a force for generations in this league. He's gone through it all, where he was hated, then loved, and you could maybe make the argument hated again with his stance or lack thereof on the Russia-Ukraine invasion. But the Russian tsunami that is Alex Ovechkin, all he does is score goals. Gets 50 at 36. And the fact that he is 4th all-time in goals now, might be 3rd, chasing, obviously, Wayne Gretzky. And the fact that it's not poo-poo, that it's not like, no, it's not going to happen, tells you everything you need to know about Alex Ovechkin. That this guy has been so consistent, such a great goal scorer. He doesn't have to do it, but I'm starting to think he will. He's 36, but he's dominant now. He's still playing at such a high level, and his team hasn't been all that great this year. So he scores 50 goals on a team where Nick Backstrom hardly played. Kuznetsov missed lots of the season. Tom Wilson was in and out. And yet he still finds ways to get on the score sheet. Washington has injuries, has problems. They still get to the playoffs. I give a lot of that credit to Alex Ovechkin. To the fact that he battled through. He stayed consistent. He was always engaged. And as we sit here today, he is third in the NHL, tied with Chris Kreider for third in goals with 50. Matthews is 25. Draisaitl, I believe, is like 26. Kreider is 30, so that's a little outlier. But Kaprizov's 26. Connor's 27. McDavid's 26. DeBrincat's 25. Like, these are young cats at the top of this list. But Ovechkin's 50, Kreider's 50. It's next one's closest is Kaprizov, Connor, McDavid with 43. That's 7-goal spread that he's ahead of these guys. I think when McDavid first came into the league, I think we all expected that McDavid would eventually win a Rocket Richard trophy. That I think we kind of expected that eventually he would surpass, he would have more goals in a season than Alex Ovechkin. Well, again, he's having a great season. McDavid's got 113 points, first in the NHL right now. But he's never had more goals in a season than Ovechkin. Yet. Which is a pretty incredible feat because Ovechkin, every year McDavid's been in the league, Ovechkin's been age 30 plus. And that's one guy I realized, Matthews has more goals than him this season, had more than him last year. But, I just think it's a really impressive feat that he continues to be this consistent, this dominant, and he doesn't look like he's slowing down. Again, I look at him, I watch, and he's always consistent. He's always playing well. And despite Washington losing talent, getting older, I don't think they're a great team anymore. He remains the engine. He remains the guy that keeps them competitive despite their, the withdrawals. I don't think they have a great goaltending. I think their defense core is mediocre at best. But he is still that driving force. He's always going to be a guy that wants to be competitive, wants to compete. If you look at Washington and Pittsburgh over the course of their careers, these guys have hardly missed the playoffs. Washington and Pittsburgh are always competitive. They're always battling. They're never saying, okay, we're going through a rebuild. Let's retool, add to what we have. Brian Burke and Ron Hextall took over in Pittsburgh. They didn't sell off. They still have Letang. They still have Malkin. They're going to make the playoffs again. Washington, they fired GMs. They fire head coaches, but they've never gone through a full rebuild. And eventually they broke through and won a Stanley Cup. So you've got to give credit to these organizations that half of it is building successful, but I think also is looking at the talent that you have. You have Alex Ovechkin. You have Sidney Crosby. And saying, you know what, we're not going to go through a rebuild because I have this player here. It's really hard to sell a rebuild when you have two pillars, two of the all-time greats on a team together. That's the difference really between Chicago and between Pittsburgh and Washington, where these teams have been able to remain competitive. And yes, it's not always a trip to the Stanley Cup final. Pittsburgh hasn't won a playoff round since their last cup. Washington hasn't either. But they get to the postseason. Chicago hasn't made the playoffs since 2016 when they were swept by the Nashville Predators. So I think it just tells you teams look at it and say, we have this all-time great. Who knows how much longer we're going to have them? But if we sell to these two guys, two ultra-competitive athletes, we're going to sell off. We're going to trade some of your great teammates, hope for the best. These guys are not sticking around for that. As much as Ovechkin, as much as Crosby, I believe, love the cities that they were drafted in. I don't think they're sticking around for a rebuild because they want to win. Because can Alex Ovechkin score 50 goals on a rebuilding team? Maybe. I mean, DeBrincat's got 40 on a bad team this year, but 40 is not 50. But he's got 40 goals this year. But I think it's obviously easier when you have better players around you. And if you know you're going to suck, you're at least going to want to put up good numbers in Ovechkin's case and hope to pass Wayne Gretzky. But I also think his vision, what people look at him now with the whole Russia thing, again, there are people that have done worse things and they get better treatment than Alex Ovechkin. Like Michael Vick is just like I hate Michael Vick, and that he's loved now and he's on TV, but Alex Ovechkin, who hasn't said he's endorsed the war, but people just assume he does, and now it's Alex Ovechkin sucks. This ruins his legacy. Poo-pooed that. This is where we stand. Like, I'm following the Johnny Depp trial. I believe Johnny Depp is completely in the right. This Amber Heard, I think, is a fucking menace. She's trying to ruin his career because she never had one to begin with, and he's one of the great actors ever. He's cool, calm, and collected. She's a fucking raging lunatic. But again, he as of right now, so entering tonight, he has 780 career goals, which means that he needs 115 goals to pass Gretzky for the most in NHL history. Does he have another 50-goal season in him? I'm not going to be the one to say no. So let's say he scores 50 next season. That's 830. I think he scored 50 this year with games still to play. I think he can score 50 again. Say he gets 30 the following season. It's 860. And I think he could, unless there's significant injury, I'm saying 30. It could be more. Let's put another 10 on there. Say 40. Next two seasons, he scores 90 goals. That leaves him at 870. Which would be 24 goals away from Gretzky. 894. So that means if he goes 50, 40, 30, so one more 50-goal season, and then you start to see a little decline, 40, then a 30, he would get to that goal mark. He would get there before this contract is over. Because I think people saw him sign this extension in the summer and automatically assumed, well, he's going to have to play past that one. And maybe he will. But he's 115 away. That's not that many goals. It can happen. 115, the way this guy's playing, I think it's going to happen. I think he will eventually be the all-time leading goal scorer, a record that I don't think anybody thought would be broken. So there's the Ovechkin storyline, but there's also Washington and Pittsburgh are in a dogfight because Washington's kind of caught fire, although they lose to Vegas last night. They get a point, but they are now tied with the Pittsburgh Penguins in the standings for the third spot in the Metropolitan. Pittsburgh and Washington both have 5 games remaining on their schedule, both at 97 points, both have the same 43, 23, and 11 records. Pittsburgh is playing the Boston Bruins tonight in a very important game for them. Washington is in Arizona tomorrow, so a favorable matchup for the Caps. But there's a race to watch. Washington's only 2 back of Boston as well, so potentially they catch fire. Boston dips a little down the stretch. They could surpass them for that second wild card spot. But I guess the question is, who does Washington want to catch? I look at it right now. Washington against Florida, as bad as Florida is defensively at times, I don't think that's a good matchup for them because I hate their goaltending. Florida is so dynamic offensively. I just think eventually their defense core is not real strong, and Florida will put up goals on them, and it might be a shootout, but I expect Florida to win that shootout. So Florida I wouldn't want to play them. That's who they play right now. If you pass Pittsburgh, you get the Rangers, who you've had playoff series with. It's very different. Used to be King Henrik who got the better of you. Used to be guys like Dan Girardi and Ryan McDonough. They've since moved on. The Rangers are a vastly different team. They have Adam Fox and Ryan Lindgren and Keandre Miller on the back end now. And their pillars up front are Temi Panarin, Ryan Strome, and a slew of others. But New York has better goaltending. They actually play a well-structured game despite having offensive defensemen. They play a physical game, which Washington does as well. But I like New York. I don't think Washington can beat them in a series. So I wouldn't want to play New York. I believe if you're living in a perfect world where you get a genie and you get to pick your opponent, to me, Washington should want Carolina. Carolina currently sits first in the Metro, although they are tied with the New York Rangers with 106 points with 5 games remaining. Carolina has a lot up in the air right now. Vincent Trocheck is out with an injury. Frederik Andersen is banged up. Who knows if he's going to be ready for the start of the postseason. So Carolina is kind of limping going into the postseason. Where Washington has caught a heater, they're playing their best hockey. I like Carolina's team. They're structured well. Aho's a great player, but they don't have game breakers. They just play a really well-structured game like a Rob Brennamore team should. But I think Washington would have their best chance of winning a series against the Carolina Hurricanes. And the 3 options are only going to be these 3 because they're not catching the Rangers. They might be able to pass Pittsburgh, and they could possibly pass Boston, but that's it. Those are their alternatives. So I would want to play Carolina. I like Carolina a lot, but I've seen them play in the postseason where you eventually play a team that just has more options offensively to score a big goal. You get stuck. You play a great system, but you can't score a goal, and that team beats you 2-1. Boston did it to them multiple times. You've seen this team go far, but they don't get over the hump because they just don't have those game breakers to do it. And maybe Svechnikov, maybe Aho have learned from those experiences and can get you over the hump this year. But I don't trust their depth as much. I don't love their goaltending situation. If Frederik Andersen is coming into the playoffs, even if he is playing, what if he's banged up? Then the situation isn't much better than a healthy Antti Raanta. So Washington's an interesting team to watch. I'm sure they're watching the Boston-Pittsburgh game tonight because that's a big one for them. How does that game go? Who wins? And where do we stand? Because going into tomorrow night for Washington, they could potentially be tied with Pittsburgh with 97 points, and they'd have a game in hand on them. Or they could be 2 back of Pittsburgh and 2 back of Boston. So they could be right there to pass either of them tomorrow night. It's fascinating. I don't know where this is going to go, but Washington is a team to watch as we go down the stretch here. Toronto-Tampa tonight down in Tampa Bay. The game is interesting because Tampa is only a point up on Boston for the 3rd spot in the Atlantic. So basically, the team that will be going to Toronto in the first round of the playoffs, they're vying for that slot. Erik Källgren will get the start tonight for Toronto. Tampa Bay, I tried to find who they're going to start. I read last week that the brass came out and said we're going to try to start Vasilevsky less down the stretch because he's been tired. So, but I think it's also, well, do we want to play Ryan Elliott? And if I'm Tampa, Källgren starting tonight, and we're going to wait and see here. I'm trying to pull up if Vasilevsky's going to start. I start Elliott because Källgren is no better than Brian Elliott. And start your backup goaltenders. Go through it that way. Again, Vasilevsky has not been announced yet, so we'll see. But, Källgren is 6-3-1, but again, he's got a 302 goals against, an 895 save percentage. So the guy hasn't exactly been a pillar-to-post great goalie. But play your backup. And for Tampa, Again, Tampa, Toronto or Carolina. Who'd you rather play? Could be New York if they win the Metropolitan, which they could do. That's still, they each got 5 games left. That's going to be a battle throughout. Rangers are in Long Island tonight. Carolina's hosting the Jets. So that will be a storyline. That battle, that to see who wins that race. But again, I'd start the backups tonight if I'm Tampa. If you play Toronto in the first round, great. If you play Carolina, great. I wouldn't fret about either one. I think they can beat either one. Although I do, and I'll say this, I said this before, Toronto is better suited this year than they ever have been. They can beat Tampa. Certainly. Doesn't mean they will, but they can. They got everything. I still worry about their net mining position, but they got a good team. They could beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in the postseason. But also, Austin Matthews will miss his 3rd straight game tonight. So he's out tonight for the Leafs. I think he's going to be okay. I think this is extreme precaution. Maybe he plays 1 game next week. I don't think he'll play in Florida on Saturday. But after this, I think they play tonight, Saturday, Sunday. They play twice next week. Maybe he plays in the season finale against the Boston Bruins just to get a game in prior to the postseason. That could be an option. But the bigger concern for Toronto, and I think this is a player that they can't, I think they should just say, we're not going to have him come playoff time. That's Jake Muzzin. I watched a video this week of Jake Muzzin on the ice after practice, and I don't think he was on the ice for practice. He just came out after. And he took a shot, and he basically swung a stick in frustration, and it looked as if, it was as if somebody had a headache and they just couldn't be on the ice anymore. They had to get off the ice. And this is a terrible thing. I don't want this to be the case. Again, I'm just speculating, but I've seen head injuries. We've all seen, if you've watched hockey enough, you know the signs. I worry that Jake Muzzin's career is over. That these head injuries, the head trauma, the concussions, the threat of CTE, this could be it. Because he's had a great career. He's been a Stanley Cup champion. But you can't play if your brain doesn't allow you. Michael Furland of the Canucks had to retire at 25 because he had concussion. Post-concussion syndrome. Every time he'd play 2 games and then he'd have headaches again and it would come back. Muzzin's had a lot of concussions the last couple of years. So a lot of injuries. And I just think this is a lingering thing that just isn't going away for him. So I think for the Leafs, as they head into this playoffs, Sandin's been injured. He's not a lock for me to just play. He hasn't earned enough in this league just to jump in and play just because he's Rasmus Sandin. But you got Gio. Liljegren's played well. You got Riley. You got Brody. You got Lyubushkin. And then, of course, you have the pillar to post. So, is their team worse without Jake Muzzin? Yes. Of course. Of course it is. But you don't always get everything. You can't always have everything. And maybe Sandin can play a few games before the playoffs. But I go through it. He doesn't automatically get to play. They're moving guys in and out. They're playing a lot of different guys. They're putting different lineups in. I like that from Sheldon Keefe. Because why not? You know you're making the playoffs. You're basically locked in the second slot. Florida doesn't lose, so you're not catching them. So just be creative. Play different guys. Go to different systems. Try everything before the postseason. Play Abruzzese, that little kid who should be playing in the playoffs. Scratch Kyle Clifford. He start the playoffs for me. Maybe you like me. Simmons brings more to the table now than Clifford brings more to the table than Simmons does. But I like the creativity. But I think the Leafs, and I'm sure internally they are prepared. They are okay. maybe okay is not the right word, but they're prepared to go into the postseason without Jake Muzzin. That's a bigger reason why you went out and got Giordano. Because he is a guy that could be a Muzzin. You could argue he's a better skater than Muzzin at this point. But you had to be prepared to have somebody play those big minutes. He's been really good since coming over to Toronto. Lyubushkin has fit in well with Riley. So now you need to be prepared. And I do think they are prepared for this because he hasn't been playing. And maybe, Justin Hall, if he has to play, he plays. Because he's been on the team lately. Sandin's been hurt. So that would just be my approach. That's my top 6. Sandin is there if you need him. And Hall's the first D out. Because I think Liljegren has found his slot. Him and Giordano play well together. And you move on from there. But it's sad. Because Muzzin's a Stanley Cup champion. He's a great player, but I wouldn't be surprised if his NHL career is over. This happens. It's a contact sport. As much as the game isn't physical like it used to be, people are faster than they ever have been. Accidents are happening, not based on just physical rough and tough in the trenches, but you might get twisted up because somebody's skating by you going 100 miles an hour. But if I'm the Leafs, if I'm Jake Muzzin, I'm sure he's starting to process, this might be it for me. And I'm sure that's not an easy conversation to have with yourself, have with your family, have with your teammates. But I do think it's something that will likely be true. Last night, Dallas Stars fall to the Edmonton Oilers. Edmonton's been on a tear, although they're still 8 points back of Calgary because they've continued their dominance. But Dallas has just faded, and they've kept teams in the playoff hunt because they are now only 2 points up on Vegas. They do have a game in hand, but they're in Calgary tonight on a back-to-back, so that's a tough position. And they keep Vancouver alive because Vancouver plays tonight. They're in Minnesota. Minnesota's red hot, but they're battling with St. Louis for that second spot to get home ice in the postseason. So they're going to be playing for something, but so is Vancouver. They're not out of it. They lose a point the other night, which is crippling. But with a win tonight, they'd be 2 points back of Dallas, and they got to hope that their buddies in Calgary can do them a favor and give another regulation loss to the Dallas Stars. But Vegas rallies last night against Washington. They find a way to win that game. But for these teams now, there's no strategy. It isn't, well, we have to approach it this way. It's just win games. That's it. Like tonight, Los Angeles plays Chicago. They should win that game, but they got 4 games to win that game. You keep winning, you'll make the post. If you're ahead, it's impossible for a team to catch you if you continue to win. That's just the way it is. If Tampa wins out, Boston can't catch them for that second spot in the Atlantic. Maybe they want to get caught, but that's just, if that's where you want to be, it's physically impossible for them to catch you. Minnesota has a game in hand on the St. Louis Blues. If they win every game down the stretch and St. Louis wins every game, Minnesota will still finish ahead of them because they have more games. That's just straight math. Again, I was shitty in math, but I know enough to get by. It gets simplistic this time of year. You watch teams to see who you like, their systems. I love that stuff. As you know, I talk about, Slavin and these type of players that can be real difference makers. Matthew Boldy on Minnesota. This kid is awesome. Great player. And he's a rookie. I love the cut of his jib. But right now, Vegas, Vancouver, you've put yourself in a bad situation. You're relying on other people to do you a favor. But for Vancouver, you lose tonight, your season's over. That's how I look at it. Because you'd be 4 back. Yeah, you'd be 4 back, and they'd have with 4 games left. You're not getting that lucky. I just don't see Dallas going that pathetic down the stretch. But they are losing it right now. Because Dallas only gets production from one line. Cole talked about it yesterday, about how Seguin and Jamie Benn just aren't productive. They aren't. They don't do enough for that team. Neither does Radulov, who makes way too much money, or their back end where Heiskanen hasn't played. Klingberg is MIA, who they kept at the deadline. Who produced for them is Joe Pavelski, Rupe Hintz, and Jason Robertson. They get 2 goals last night. Hintz and Robertson are the key contributors on both goals. But after that, it's a steady decline. Past that, it wasn't even close. Edmonton was above and beyond the better team. So they need help. I think Dallas needs to find their game. They need guys to step up. Because as we sit here, Vegas is only 2 points back of Dallas. Vegas is 3 back of Los Angeles, but I like their chances of catching Dallas more. Vancouver's 4 back. They get a tougher schedule. But let's just look at it. Dallas has Calgary tonight. It's not an easy game, especially on a back-to-back. And Kachuk's going for 100 points tonight. Gaudreau still has a chance at the Art Ross. So you can't expect that to be a walk in the park. Then they have the Kraken Saturday. That's a matchup. That's a game you die for this time of year, is to get the Kraken. So then they have the Kraken Saturday. They're off. Monday, they're off. Tuesday, they have the Golden Knights. That could be a potential season-defining game. Then the following night, the Golden Knights are in Chicago. Dallas hosts Arizona. So both games they should win against non-playoff teams. And then they both end their season on the Friday night. Dallas has Anaheim. The Golden Knights are in St. Louis. So it's interesting. Definitely, again, teams have easier schedules. That doesn't mean you're going to win. LA should beat Chicago tonight. That's a game teams would kill for. To have a team like a Seattle on your schedule. Have a team like anybody on. You look at a race. Like Carolina's got Winnipeg. They're out of it. That's a good matchup tonight. Kings are at Chicago. Blues are playing San Jose while Minnesota gets the Canucks. I'd rather play San Jose. But that doesn't mean you're going to win. Because teams love to play spoiler as well. And next week, I'm going to touch on Edmonton more. Because I watched a lot of their game last night. I don't love their goaltending. But they look like a good team. Hyman looks healthy. That's a big part of why they're winning. Him and Draisaitl have good chemistry. Evander Kane is coming together. Him and Connor are meshing. Bouchard, who I was never really that big of a fan of, is starting to play really well on the back end. They're gelling. They have chemistry. I don't know how big of a run they can go, but they can beat LA for sure. For sure. Can they beat Calgary? Tougher. But it'd be a fun series. And I just think Edmonton looks good. Both Canadian teams out west are looking strong going into the playoffs. So we'll talk about that next week as well. But yeah, some interesting games this weekend. Like I said, there's all kinds of races. I mean, again, some of these games are mundane, but you have Toronto, Florida Saturday night. That should be a fun game. Rangers, Bruins Saturday afternoon. Predators, Lightning, an important game for both. I mean, Dallas, Seattle. That's not, again, I might be the only person that watches that game, but I'm going to watch it because it's an important game. Look, like Friday night's action, there's 4 games, but there's some interesting, like Washington plays there where they need that win to keep going. Kraken, Wild, there's some good NHL games this weekend. We'll continue to monitor it next week as we get closer to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now let's get to the NBA, because what a night it was in Major League Baseball. In the National Basketball Association last night, because there were some good games last night. Some really good games, actually. All of the games were close. You had some highly contested basketball. I was going to start with Brooklyn and Boston. I thought that was an interesting game. I have to admit when I'm wrong. I will do that in just a second here. But I have to start with the Toronto Raptors. I have to start with that because, I love when people just tweet and they don't tell the whole story and it lacks context and it lacks the real story and the real point of the story. You could write, well, Goldilocks and the Three Bears and how you got there and how, all kinds of stories can be told. But if you don't tell the whole story, if you don't tell the true emphasis of the story, then why even bother? So last night, Toronto Raptors are playing the 76ers. They have a lead they're tied going into the fourth quarter. They start the fourth quarter playing well. Foul calls are evens. All is well in the world. And somehow the night turned. The game was over when a timeout was called from Doc Rivers with about 3 seconds left in the overtime period. So he runs down the floor, which was a violation, not allowed to cross midway, and he calls a timeout. Now, I'm also going to add that the fact that he can't call a timeout from all the way down there seems a bit stupid to me because you have timeouts. Why can't you call them? What if he's all the way down there? Maybe there should be official that hangs back. But nevertheless, nobody loves rules more than me. But he calls a timeout. They point out after the fact he can't cross, but he did. They didn't call it. Yada, yada, yada. So coming out of the timeout, Joel Embiid, likely NBA MVP, nominated for the award, gets a three-point shot, drills it. Swish, money, 104-101 76ers. So then it's not, we'll get to the real story, which I'll touch on in a minute. It isn't the details about the loss. It's just, oh my God, they called the timeout. Oh, and I see all these Sportsnet guys whining because their Raptors, who aren't better than the Sixers, are going to lose game 3 and may likely get swept on Saturday afternoon. So there's crying, there's uproar, and there's just it's lacking context. I said, okay, I'm going to have to do that tomorrow because apparently they're not going to do it today. So, was the timeout an illegal infraction? Technically, yes. So you're right about that, Tim McAuliffe, other people at Sportsnet, who, I get it, get paid to watch the Raptors and Leafs and not many other teams, but that's hard work to only cover 2 teams, but good on you. But you do that. You get that point right, you tweet it out, good for you. Your followers you'll get a few more out of that. The Raptors might throw you in a little check. They might come on for an interview. Good for you. But did the Raptors lose last night because that timeout? Well, maybe according to Sportsnet, TSN employees, they did. But if you watch the game, if you know anything about sports, in my opinion, if you blame the refs for losing a game, you were never going to win that game originally. You were never, because how often can you go back and say, well, if we made that shot, then it wouldn't come down to the ref. It wouldn't come down to his decision. It would be, well, if we scored here, it isn't about the referee. You're coming up and making an excuse for failure. To quote Pat Quinn, that is a loser's race. I'm going to do that again because it's fun. A loser's race. It's stupid. It's what losers do because they did not lose last night because of a timeout by Doc Rivers. They lost last night because let's go through why they really lost. Toronto Raptors lost last night because they missed 6 free throws. How about with 24 seconds left in the overtime period, Precious Achiuwa goes 0 for 2 at the free throw line, which would have put the Raptors up by deuce. So maybe you make 1 or 2 of those, it's a different story. You make any of those, you lose by 3. You make all 6, you win by 3. How about that? They're called free throws for a reason. How about the Philadelphia 76ers turn the ball over last night 22 times? The Raptors only turned it over 10. You lose a game where you are up in the turnover differential by a plus 12 and you lose? How about get some points off turnovers? Could that be a solution? And it's not the whistle? It's not the referee? It's not the zebra that cost you the game? Maybe. Then there's also this. James Harden is the second best player in the Philadelphia 76ers. For now, anyway. Maxey looks pretty good. For right now, James Harden's won MVP. He's the best player on the second best player in the 76ers. He did not play the entire overtime. He fouled out. So he did not play. So you went 5 minutes where the Sixers did not have Thibault, did not have Harden. They had Maxey and Embiid and Danny Green, who can't hit a shot to save his life. You had Anunoby. You had Siakam. You had whoever you want, Van Vliet, who's been a no-show in this series. But you had all your guys, the core of your championship team. You couldn't pull it together. They scored 4 points in the whole overtime period. Who's winning when you score 4 points in an overtime? Blaming the refs is such a lazy thing. It's something that I've really noticed when I played minor hockey, and it's this going through it and playing just sports. When you tell your kids, I think when we tell the youth that you lost an event, you lost something because of a referee, not because of something that happened in the game, you're not teaching the right lesson. Excusing 2 missed free throws for a timeout that was not supposed to be called is not the right lesson. That doesn't make Preston Achua want to be any more clutch, because you can go in there and say, gentlemen, guys, if we didn't get that shitty timeout call, well, we would have went to a second overtime, we would have won. How do you know you would have won? You put up 4 points in the first overtime period. I just find this so baffling how this had nothing to do with officials. This had nothing to do with them reviewing the blocker goaltend at the end of regulation, which was a goaltend. They didn't have to review it. I hate the review system. If you listen to me, I get rid of all review. I hate it all. Any sport, hate it. Get rid of it. Takes away time, breaks up the momentum of a game. But the Raptors lost because they were inferior. You played your best game of the series, and you still played like junk. 22 turnovers by Philly. I can't say this enough. And you lost the game. You had 10. Baffling. It's baffling that this is the reason. That's not the reason you lost, Holmes. You lost because you couldn't take advantage of opportunities. When you intercept the football and you're running for the end zone and you fumble it, the team gets it back. What was that interception worth? Not a whole heck of a lot. When you play a great round, you shoot 9 under par, but you're trailing by 10 and you have a birdie putt to tie it and you have a 2-footer and you lip out and you have to settle for par. What was that day worth? Not a whole lot. Maybe a career best, but did you win? No. Pro sports is about winning. Point blank. It's not about excuses. Like, are pro athletes now little children where we have to make up an excuse for grown men for coming up short? The narrative shouldn't be that timeout cost them the game, because that was it. That's what I read on Twitter last night. People bitching this morning. Make a shot. Make a free throw. You didn't lose because of foul calls either, because both teams had 21. So it was even. This drove me nuts, because it's just, these narratives where these companies just kiss ass and write these phony narratives for no reason, it bothers me. Like, you're getting paid good money. Do your fucking job. Anyway, I apologize for cursing. Not really, but I apologize. Let's get to Brooklyn, Boston. On this show, I make predictions. I don't make hot takes because I think that's kind of stupid, but I do make predictions. And I said, following Sunday's game, I talked to Seamus this week. I've talked about this Brooklyn-Boston series quite a bit. I said that Kevin Durant would never have as bad a shooting game, would never have as bad a game as he did in game one the rest of this series. Obviously, I said that because I thought I was going to be right, that I had faith in Kevin Durant, one of the best players of his generation. And I've never seen him stink it up like he did the other day. I thought he'd come back with a vengeance. Well, when I'm wrong on this podcast, I admit it. I'm wrong. I was wrong last night because Kevin Durant was worse last night than he was in game one. Now, you look at the box score and say, well, Kevin Durant had 23 points. He had a pretty good game. No. Kevin Durant shot 4 for 17 from the field. He only shot 2 threes last night. And what the Boston Celtics have done to him, have done to Kyrie Irving, just have done to the Brooklyn Nets in general, is truly inspiring because they are bringing defense back. They are playing swarming, in-your-face, relentless defense. Smart, Grant Williams, Horford, Tice, they play 5-man defense. And Kevin Durant has been rattled this entire series. He's never comfortable. You seen him last night. He catches the ball. He's trying to get rid of it. He's trying to shoot it too quickly because he knows 2 guys are going to be on him like bees before he can even think about what he's going to do next. He played horrible last night. Not to mention, you never think, well, Kevin Durant, yes, he's 7 foot, he's really slender, but you would never think that he's soft, that you've never seen him be in that position because he just shoots threes, he comes up, he's a tough guy. He's looked a little soft in this series because he can't fight a way out of this. You're the best player in the series. You're the best player, most people say, on the planet. I think Antetokounmpo is the best player in the world, but you can't find a way to make a transition. You can't find a way to get out of this. To me, he's panicked. His best move is to pass the ball, and his best play last night was late in the fourth quarter when he found Bruce Brown. Great pass when he got a double team on him. And Bruce Brown had a great game. But Durant goes 4 for 17. Irving goes 4 for 13. And Durant was terrible in game one. He was terrible last night. But for Brooklyn, they played decent defense last night because Tatum wasn't the biggest factor. He got close to 10 assists, but he didn't shoot the ball well. But they play 5-man defense, and you can tell that the Boston Celtics know it's the postseason. I think you can tell the Boston Celtics want to win this series desperately. I think part of it because it's Brooklyn, and just the look of their role players. Grant Williams off the bench last night had 17 points, 6 rebounds. He went 4 for 4 from the field. But also, he played 30-plus minutes. He played Tice's minutes because he plays such good defense. He just works extremely hard, keeps guys in front of him. Al Horford has got a combined 36 points in 2 games. It's more than Kevin Durant, by the way. And he shot 6 for 10 last night with 6 rebounds. But also, he's knocking down threes. He's playing tough defense. And again, Celtics, I look at Brooklyn. I've heard on the broadcast, Drummond is too slow. Well, the Brooklyn is going small with Nicholas Claxton. I would play Drummond because he's got a better chance of going up against Grant Williams, going up against Horford, because Claxton's just a non-factor. He's a liability on defense. He doesn't bring that much to the table. He doesn't do as good a screen and rolls as Andre Drummond. I think Drummond could create more space for Durant and for Kyrie Irving because We know they need it. They are 4 for 13 last night for Kyrie, 4 for 17 for Durant. Just swarming defense. But Williams played 30-plus minutes. You had Horford play minutes. Peyton Pritchard played in the fourth quarter. He played into the fourth quarter. A skinny white guard. Giving hope to, us white kids everywhere. He plays big minutes into the fourth quarter. So for Brooklyn, it's pretty simple. It's simple and it's not. Their best players have to play better. But it's also, Durant, how are you going to make an adjustment? Because you're not getting any space. You're getting doubled. And you think, okay, maybe he'd get more space last night because Bruce Brown had the first 9 points. It was a 9-0 start to the game last night. Bruce Brown getting all 9 points. But they didn't. They continued to double Durant. They didn't change their strategy. And I don't think Kyrie was as doubled last night. Just he didn't have a great game. He didn't have a great stroke. He didn't look as engaged as he was in game one. So historically in the NBA, being down 2-0, you have a 7% chance of winning that series. I don't think Brooklyn's going to win this series. I thought Boston would win this. I predicted Boston would win it. I feel good about it now. They play tough defense. They can beat anybody. The Bucks lose last night to the Bulls, which shocked me. I thought that would be the lock sweep of the first round. It might be the other side where you got Miami and Philadelphia are both in position to get sweeps moving forward here. But I think Boston plays tough defense, and Tatum is evolving because he didn't shoot the ball well last night. He wasn't a great offensive threat. But what did he do? He distributed. He found a way to have a presence in the game, have an impact on the game, and he wasn't just there. He had an impact. He found Williams. He found guys to make a difference. And that's all you can. Sometimes you're just not going to have it. You need to find a way to be different, to have an impact, and he did that. See Walker in the chat. Seamus probably brought tickets to the Celtics championship parade already. I'm sure he did, but they're playing well. I like the Bucks still, but credit to DeMar DeRozan. Drops 41 last night. Mid-range king. Good for the Bulls. I didn't think they'd win a game in the series. Good for the Pelicans. I want to see competitive series. So good for these teams for battling back and proving some people wrong. We'll see if the Nuggets can do that tonight. But this postseason, if the Celtics go far, where does Jason Tatum rank at the end of it? If they get to an NBA Finals, if they go really deep, is he in the top 5 players in the NBA type list? It'd be hard to argue that he isn't if he gets them there, because I think he'll be the most important player on the team. But this Boston team is different than they were before. Brad Stevens was a great college coach. I don't think he ever had the respect of a locker room of his players because he was Brad Stevens. He's kind of a lame kind of loser on the sideline. And I just don't think he never really seemed to be that engaged with it. Ime Udoka has got this team believing. They play hard for him. They play hard for each other. On Miami, on Boston, these teams, I think, just look at each other and say, yeah, we might have one player that's better than the rest, but we all need to play a certain way for us to win. In Brooklyn, they have no offensive sets. They have no creativity. It's Durant shot, then Irving, and then it's panic turnover, and then it goes down the other way. Brooklyn had a 17-point lead in the third quarter, and they threw it away. You could have went home with the split, but you're down 2-0. Durant's had 2 terrible games. What do you got? What do you got? He's never been swept in his career. Lost in 5 to LeBron in 2012 in the 2012 finals. I don't think he will get swept, but you need to answer. Because Kyrie was great in game 1. The Celtics still found a way to win. I think it'd be nice to be at home. But Bruce Brown's not going to play better than he did last night. Dragic has been playing extremely well off the bench. He looks like the vintage Dragic in Miami. So it's really on Durant to answer the bell. LeBron gets all kind of criticism. Some of it fair, some of it unfair. Jordan did. All the best players. Durant is right there with them. Antetokounmpo was labeled for, he can't shoot, he can't play. Okay, whatever. Well, this is it. What do you got? Because you put yourself in a position where you need to win. And you need to answer the bell, and we'll see if he can do it Saturday night in Brooklyn. But this weekend, a lot of basketball, a lot of the NBA playoffs. Tonight we got Grizzlies Timberwolves game 3 in Minnesota. You got Mavericks Jazz. Doncic might play. It's still, he practiced. It's still not the yes or no. I haven't heard anything yet. If we hear anything before we wrap today, I will let you know. But haven't heard anything as of yet. And Warriors Nuggets as the Nuggets try to get on the board tonight. Lots of games this weekend in the NBA. I'm interested to see if Doncic can play and how the Jazz respond tonight, because they laid an egg in game 2 and they really threw away a potential stranglehold on the series heading back to Utah. But yes, I think we'll see a lot of good sports this weekend. Baseball, before we wrap today. I see a couple of results. The Blue Jays are about to win in Boston. They're up 3-0, so they're going to get the win today, win 2 or 3 in Boston. That's a good series early in the season to go in there, get 2 out of 3. George Springer got injured last night, so it looks like might miss a little bit of time, but Tapia was playing today for him. He went 2 for 5. But you got Zach Collins has been playing well. Gurriel Jr., Matt Chapman starting to find it. He went 3 for 4 this afternoon with an RBI. So he's starting to play well as well. Gausman has gone 8 innings, 6 hit ball, 8 strikeouts. So great start for Gausman in Boston. Tigers beat the Yankees. Guardians sweep the White Sox. Big sweep by the Guardians there. Mets take 3 or 4 from San Francisco. But a couple of things, baseball early in the season. Number 1, great to see Shohei Ohtani last night go 6 innings, 12 strikeouts, just vintage Ohtani, what we saw last year pitching. He also got an RBI double in the first inning. So love seeing Ohtani get some of that flair back, get some of that confidence. He needed it. So Ohtani, great story there, and he beats the Astros as well, so that probably meant even more to him. So good to see that from Shohei. Nolan Arenado, best third baseman in baseball, but he's still kind of quiet because he's in St. Louis. They got a good team in St. Louis, and also I think Arenado will emerge as an MVP-type player this season, a guy to keep in the mix. Hits a 2-run homer in the top of the 9th in a scoreless game last night to get St. Louis the win. He's a guy that I love. I think he's the best defensive player. If he can get that bat cooking, this guy is going to be a serious, serious problem for Major League Baseball. So he, in the National League, I think Arenado, potentially even a Matt Olson, first for the Braves. I think he's a guy that could be a wild card to win it. Then there's your usual suspects. A guy from the Dodgers, if they have a big year, could be in the mix as well. But I think he's a sleeper for me. Long season to go, but that's just a projection. But this weekend in baseball, if I could only watch one series, if I could only watch one series this weekend in baseball, it would be Padres-Dodgers. And they'll play each other lots this season. They're in the same division. But they have the number 1 and number 2 payroll in baseball. It's interesting enough. They they start the series tonight, so it's a 4-gamer. They have history. They obviously don't like each other. The management and Padres, I think, hate the Dodgers. They resent them for all the success they had, the Padres being a small market. But I said before the season that I thought that the Giants would take a step back and that the Padres would be the biggest threat to the Dodgers this season. I still believe that. Padres currently set at 9-5. Dodgers are at 9-3. Freddie Freeman is batting .333. He's got 2 homers. He's had a really hot start. Jurickson Profar, who was a quiet pickup for the Padres, has 4 homers, 11 RBIs. So he's had a good start for them. But this weekend, you get to see Julio Urias. You get to see Clayton Kershaw pitch. You get to see Joe Musgrove. You get to see some good players at Petco Park in San Diego. I think there's a lot of storylines. There's a lot of great players, Machado and Freeman and all these guys that you're going to get to see play in this series. Some good pitching matchups. So, Jays are in Houston. That's a good series as well. But if I had to pick one, it would be Dodgers-Padres, just because I'm interested to see what this series is like. It's early, but if Dodgers take 3 out of 4, they're sending an early message. They're sending an early message that we have control of this. We're not worried about this situation. So, the series starts tomorrow. So there's no game tonight between Padres and Dodgers, but tomorrow night that starts up. To me, that's the series to watch. Padres, Dodgers. We'll see what comes of it. But lots of great sports this weekend. We got the draft next week. The NHL regular season ends a week tomorrow, so that's going to go. We got NBA playoffs. So lots happening. We're going to touch on it all. Again, I'm off tomorrow, off to get a tattoo and get some more crap on my arm. So maybe I'll show you what I get next week or something. If you watch the video version of the podcast, got a few different designs and space here, maybe fill something up eventually, but that's on the docket tomorrow. But I hope you guys all have a great weekend. Stay healthy, stay safe. This has been To The Point.